The restaurant buzzed with 40 voices pretending to care about my 39th birthday. I sat at the head of a mahogany table that probably cost more than my monthly salary, watching my wife Mira orchestrate the evening like a conductor leading an orchestra toward disaster. "Another toast," called Ron Hartley, my former friend from college, raising his third glass of champagne, "to Silas Kelran, the man who married up so high he needs oxygen." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. I forced a smile and took another sip of wine that tasted like expensive disappointment. The Meridian Club's private dining room gleamed with crystal and silver, every surface reflecting the faces of people who tolerated me because they loved my wife's family money. Mira stood beside me in a black dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her auburn hair caught the chandelier light as she smiled that perfect smile she'd perfected for cameras and board meetings. At 37, she still turned heads, still commanded rooms, still made me wonder what the heck she'd ever seen in a mid-level architect from Michigan. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice carrying that slight southern accent she'd never quite lost despite 15 years in Chicago. "Silas means so much to all of us." I caught the emphasis on all of us and felt my stomach tighten. Something was wrong. Mira's sister Tessa sat 3 seats down, her dark eyes avoiding mine. She'd been nervous all evening, picking at her salmon and checking her phone every few minutes. "Speech! Speech!" chanted Lindsay Morrison, Mira's college roommate and current social climbing partner. I stood, raising my glass. "Well, if you insist on hearing me ramble—" "Oh, we do," said Carla Hendricks, another member of Mira's inner circle. "Tell us about your exciting promotion at the firm." The words hit like a slap. There had been no promotion. In fact, I'd been demoted 3 weeks ago, moved from senior architect to junior project manager after questioning some irregularities in our permits department. Mira knew this. Everyone at this table knew this. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I've been learning a lot about the construction industry lately. Amazing what you discover when you start asking the right questions." Mira's smile flickered for just a moment. Across the table, her father, Harsen Rellan, shifted in his chair. At 72, he still looked like he could arm wrestle a bulldozer and win. His construction empire, Rellan Holdings, had built half the skyline visible through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows. "Questions can be dangerous," Harsen said quietly. "Sometimes it's better to focus on what you know for certain." "Oh, I agree completely," I replied. "Certainty is everything, like being certain about the people you trust." Tessa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and went pale. Mira reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. My heart started hammering as she placed it on the table between us. "Speaking of certainty," she said, her voice dropping to that intimate tone she used when she wanted something, "I have something for you, darling. A birthday gift, you might say." The conversations around us gradually died as people noticed the envelope. I could feel 40 pairs of eyes watching us like we were dinner theater. "Go ahead," Mira whispered. "Open it." I knew what it was before I broke the seal. Divorce papers. Thick, official, and thorough. The kind that meant lawyers had been working for months. "Happy birthday, Silas," she said softly, sliding a gold pen across the table. "Sign now, and we can keep this civilized. Refuse—" She leaned closer, her lips almost touching my ear. "And I'll tell everyone your secret. About the gambling, about the debts, about why you really got demoted." The gambling. The fictional gambling problem she'd been setting up for months with carefully planted stories and forged bank statements. I'd found the evidence in her home office 2 weeks ago, tucked behind her law school diploma like a trophy. I picked up the pen, feeling its weight. Around us, the restaurant had gone quiet, except for the soft clink of silverware and the distant murmur of other diners who didn't know they were watching a marriage explode. "Which secret?" I whispered back, my voice so low only she could hear. "The one about your sister, or the one about your father's company?" The color drained from her face like water from a broken glass. I continued, still smiling for our audience. "The one about Tessa feeding me documents for the past 6 months? Or the one about the bribes to city inspectors? The forged permits? The buildings that should never have passed inspection?" Her hand trembled as she reached for her wine glass. "You're bluffing." "Inspector Rodriguez, case number 47291. 50,000 in cash for the Millennium Tower permits. Inspector Chen, case number 52847. 75,000 for the Harborview complex. Should I continue?" Mira's breathing became shallow. Across the table, Harsen was watching us with the intensity of a hawk studying prey. "You have nothing," she whispered, but her voice cracked on the last word. I set the pen down without signing. "Tessa's been very helpful. Amazing what a sister will do when she discovers her own father planned to cut her out of the inheritance completely. When she finds out the whole fortune's built on corruption that could land the entire family in federal prison. "Ladies and gentlemen," called Rafe D.L. from the far end of the table, apparently oblivious to the drama unfolding. At 44, Mira's father's chief legal counsel still thought he was the smartest man in every room. "I think our host needs another toast." But nobody was listening to Rafe anymore. They were all watching Mira's face as she processed what I'd just told her. "The documents are in 3 locations," I continued quietly. "Copies with a journalist, copies with the FBI field office, and originals in a safe deposit box that only I can access. Your move, sweetheart." She grabbed for the divorce papers, but I was faster. The envelope hit the floor, scattering legal documents across the expensive carpet. "Silas," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, we can work this out." "Like we worked out your affair with Rafe?" I asked. "Or like we worked out your father's plan to have me declared mentally incompetent after the divorce? Amazing what people say when they think the house is empty." The veins in her neck stood out like cords. Around us, conversations had stopped entirely. Even the waitstaff had frozen, sensing the tension. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly feeling lighter than I had in months. "Oh, and Mira? About Jasper's paternity test results from last year? The ones you thought I'd never see? We should probably discuss those, too." Her wineglass slipped from her fingers, shattering against her plate. The sound echoed through the silent dining room like a gunshot. "How?" she whispered. "Tessa's not the only one with access to your father's files. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look." Harsen stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I think we should continue this conversation elsewhere?" "Oh, I don't think so," I said, standing to face him. "I think we should continue it right here, in front of all these lovely people who've been so interested in our family business." Mira was scrambling to collect the scattered papers, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. "Please," she whispered. "Not here. Not like this." "Exactly like this," I replied. "You wanted a public birthday celebration. You wanted witnesses? Well, congratulations. You've got them." I turned to address the table. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid there's been a slight change in tonight's entertainment. Instead of celebrating my birthday, we're going to discuss some fascinating real estate development practices, and maybe some interesting questions about family loyalty." Tessa finally spoke up, her voice barely audible. "Silas, maybe we should—" "Should what?" I interrupted. "Should keep protecting the family business? Should keep quiet about the bribes and the affairs and the lies? Should let them destroy me quietly so they can keep their precious reputation intact?" Mira looked up at me from the floor where she was still gathering papers, mascara streaking her cheeks. "What do you want?" "Full custody of Jasper," I said without hesitation. "The lake house in Wisconsin. And your complete cooperation when the federal investigation begins." "Investigation?" Harsen's voice was sharp. "Oh yes," I smiled. "Didn't I mention? The FBI is very interested in Rellan Holdings. Apparently someone's been asking questions about your permit processes. Funny how these things snowball." The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Finally, Mira tore the divorce papers in half, then in half again, the pieces falling like confetti around her feet. "There," she said, her voice hollow. "Happy birthday, Silas." I sat back down and picked up my fork, cutting a piece of the elaborate chocolate cake the restaurant had provided. It tasted like victory and ashes, sweet and bitter all at once. "Thank you, darling," I said. "This is shaping up to be the best birthday I've had in years." The aftermath of the birthday dinner followed me home like a persistent shadow. Our penthouse apartment on Lakeshore Drive felt different now, charged with the electricity of secrets finally exposed. Mira had driven herself home in her BMW, leaving me to make awkward excuses to our guests about family stress and misunderstandings. I found her in the living room at midnight, still in her black dress, staring out at the lake through our floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights reflected off the water like scattered diamonds, beautiful and cold. "Jasper's asleep," she said without turning around. "I told him you had to stay late to thank people for coming." Our 11-year-old son, the quiet, brilliant boy who looked more like Rafe Deal every day but still called me Dad with genuine affection. The paternity test results hidden in Harsen's private files had confirmed what I'd suspected for months, but Jasper didn't know. Might never need to know if I played this right. "Good," I said, loosening my tie. "He doesn't need to be part of this." "Part of what, exactly?" She turned to face me, and I could see she'd been crying. The perfect makeup was gone, replaced by red eyes and streaked mascara. "What's your endgame here, Silas? Destroy my family? Destroy me?" I walked to the bar cart and poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, the same expensive stuff Harsen had given me for Christmas back when he still thought I was useful. Your family was destroying itself long before I got involved. I just decided to stop being collateral damage. Tessa betrayed us. Tessa saved herself. Smart girl. She saw which way the wind was blowing when your father decided to cut her out of the inheritance. Amazing how quickly family loyalty evaporates when money's involved. Mira sank into the leather chair by the window, suddenly looking every one of her 37 years. How long have you known? About everything? Pieces for months. The whole picture? About 3 weeks. I sat across from her, noting how she avoided eye contact. Right around the time you started planting evidence of my supposed gambling problem. Very thorough work, by the way. Forged bank statements, fake receipts from casinos I've never visited. If I hadn't found your planning documents, I might have believed it myself. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. How was it supposed to happen? Quiet divorce, custody battle where you paint me as an unstable gambler, then what? Institutionalization? Convenient accident? Or just social exile while you and Rafe play house with my son? She flinched at Rafe's name. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Daddy expects you to be his perfect little soldier. I get it. But here's what I don't understand. When did you stop being the woman I married and become his puppet? The question hung in the air between us like smoke. Outside, a police siren wailed in the distance, the sound echoing off the glass towers of downtown Chicago. You never understood what it meant to be a Rellan, she said finally. The expectations, the responsibilities. The family business isn't just about money, Silas. It's about legacy, about power. It's about corruption. I took a sip of bourbon, feeling it burn. Your father's been bribing city officials for 20 years. The permits, the inspections, the zoning variances, all of it bought and paid for. How many buildings in this city should never have been approved? How many people are living and working in structures that cut corners on safety? You don't know what you're talking about. Inspector Martinez, $50,000 for the Riverside Plaza permits. The foundation work was substandard, but it passed inspection anyway. Inspector Williams, $30,000 for the Grant Park office complex. Fire exits that don't meet code, but somehow got approved. I leaned forward. Should I continue? Because I have about 40 more examples. Mira's hands were shaking now. Where did you get all this? Your sister's very thorough and very angry. Turns out Harsen's been planning to leave everything to you and cut Tessa out completely. Something about her being too emotional for the family business. She's been copying files for months, building her own insurance policy. She wouldn't dare use them. She already has. The FBI received an anonymous package 3 days ago. Very comprehensive. Financial records, permit applications, recorded phone conversations. Your father's been under federal surveillance since Tuesday. The color drained from Mira's face. You're lying. Am I? Check your father's office building tomorrow. Look for the white van parked across the street, government plates, tinted windows. They're not even trying to hide anymore. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back. This will destroy everything. The company, the family, our reputation. Your reputation was built on lies. Maybe it's time for some truth. And what about Jasper? What happens to him when his grandfather goes to prison? When his mother's family name becomes synonymous with corruption? Did you think about that in your little revenge fantasy? The question hit harder than I expected. I had thought about it, late at night when the anger faded and the guilt crept in. Jasper was innocent in all this, a kid who just wanted to build model airplanes and read books about space exploration. Jasper will be fine, I said, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. He's got a trust fund that's separate from the company assets, and he's got me. You're not his father. The words landed like a physical blow. We'd never spoken it aloud before, this truth that had been growing between us like a cancer. Biologically? No, but I'm the one who taught him to ride a bike. I'm the one who helps with homework and reads bedtime stories and shows up to soccer games. Rafe might have contributed genetic material, but I'm his dad in every way that matters. Tears started flowing down her cheeks again. I never meant for it to happen. With Rafe. It was just, Daddy was so angry about the quarterly reports, and you were working late every night on that project in Milwaukee, and Rafe was there. Spare me the justification. Affairs happen. People make mistakes. But planning to destroy me, planning to steal my son and have me declared incompetent. That's not a mistake, Mira. That's evil. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and smiled. What? Mira asked, noticing my expression. Tessa. She's at the FBI field office right now, giving her formal statement. Apparently, they're very interested in her story, especially the part about the safety violations. Mira collapsed back into the chair, her head in her hands. We're ruined. You're ruined. I'm finally free. What do you want from me, Silas? What will it take to make this stop? I finished my bourbon and set the glass down carefully. I already told you. Full custody of Jasper, the lake house, and your complete cooperation with the federal investigation. The lake house was my grandmother's, and now it'll be mine. Consider it compensation for 11 years of lies. Daddy will never agree to this. Daddy doesn't have a choice. He can cooperate and maybe avoid federal prison, or he can fight and definitely go to federal prison. The evidence is overwhelming, Mira. Tessa made sure of that. She looked up at me with something that might have been respect. I underestimated you. Everyone did. The quiet architect, the man who married up, the guy who just smiled and nodded while his wife's family treated him like hired help. I stood, straightening my jacket. Turns out I was paying attention all along. Where are you going? To check on our son, then to bed. Tomorrow's going to be a very interesting day. I walked toward Jasper's room, then paused at the doorway. Oh, and Mira, you might want to call Rafe. Let him know his legal services won't be needed anymore. Something tells me he's going to have his own problems to worry about. Her sharp intake of breath followed me down the hall. In Jasper's room, I found him sleeping peacefully, his latest model airplane half finished on the desk beside his bed. Whatever happened next, I'd make sure he was protected. He deserved better than the family he'd been born into, but he also deserved better than a father consumed by revenge. The thought troubled me as I watched him sleep, his face peaceful in the dim light from the hallway. How far was I willing to go to destroy the people who'd tried to destroy me, and what would be left of me when it was over? The next morning brought unseasonably warm weather for October in Chicago, the kind of false spring that makes you forget winter's coming. I was making coffee when Harsen Rellan walked into our kitchen like he owned it, which technically he did. The penthouse was part of Mira's trust fund, another golden chain I'd been wearing without realizing it. We need to talk, he said, settling his bulk into one of the breakfast bar stools. At 72, he still moved with the confidence of a man who'd built an empire from nothing. Gray hair perfectly styled, suit probably worth more than most people's cars, and eyes like chips of blue ice. Good morning to you too, Harsen. I poured coffee into 2 mugs, noting how his hands trembled slightly when he reached for one. Sleep well? Cut the act, Silas. You've made your point. Now let's discuss terms. Terms? I sipped my coffee, enjoying the premium blend Mira ordered from some boutique roaster in Seattle. I wasn't aware we were negotiating. Everyone negotiates. It's just a matter of finding the right price. Jasper wandered into the kitchen in his pajamas, hair sticking up in 3 directions. Grandpa, you're here early. Harsen's expression softened as he looked at his grandson, or the boy he thought was his grandson. Hey there, champ. How's that airplane coming along? Good. Dad helped me with the landing gear last night. Want to see? Maybe later, buddy, I said, ruffling his hair. Why don't you get dressed for school? Mom's driving you today. After Jasper left, the kitchen fell silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic 20 floors below. He's a good kid, Harsen said finally. Yes, he is. Be a shame if this situation affected him negatively. The threat was subtle but clear. I set down my coffee cup and looked directly at him. Is that what we're doing now? Threatening children? I'm simply observing that children suffer when families fall apart, when fathers lose custody battles, when trust funds get tied up in legal proceedings. Jasper's trust fund is protected. I made sure of that when I set it up 3 years ago. Trust funds can be challenged, especially when questions arise about paternity. My stomach clenched, but I kept my voice steady. What questions would those be? Harsen reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were medical records, lab reports, and a document I recognized. The paternity test results I'd thought were safely hidden in his private files. Interesting reading, he said. Seems our boy Jasper has some unusual genetic markers. Doesn't match you at all, as it turns out. But there are some striking similarities to my legal counsel. Rafe? He closed the folder. Now, I'm not a vindictive man, Silas, but if this information were to become public during a custody battle, you'd destroy your own grandson's life to protect yourself? I'd protect my family's interests, just like you're protecting yours. I walked to the window, looking out at the lake. A few early joggers were making their way along the shoreline path, their breath visible in the cool morning air. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that 20 floors above them, a family was tearing itself apart. What do you want, Harsen? The federal investigation stops. Tessa recants her statement. The documents disappear. In exchange, you get a generous divorce settlement and supervised visitation with Jasper. Supervised visitation with my own son? With Rafe's son. Let's be accurate about these things. The casual cruelty in his voice made my hands clench into fists. Jasper doesn't know. And he doesn't have to know, assuming we can reach an understanding. Mira appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work in a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She looked between us, reading the tension in the air. Daddy, what are you doing here? Having a conversation with your husband about family priorities. She poured herself coffee with shaking hands. The FBI called this morning. They want to interview me this afternoon. What did you tell them? That I'd need to consult with my attorney first. Harsen nodded approvingly. Good girl. Rafe's handling all family legal matters now. He'll know how to manage this. Rafe's compromised, I said. He's the father of your grandson and your daughter's lover. Any lawyer would call that a conflict of interest. Rafe's loyal, Harsen corrected. Something that's apparently in short supply these days. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Tessa's number. Excuse me, I said, walking into the living room. Hello? Silas? Tessa's voice was strained. We need to meet. Something's happened. What kind of something? Not over the phone. Can you meet me at Lincoln Park, the zoo entrance? When? Now. And Silas, be careful. I think they're watching me. The line went silent. I stared at the phone, my mind racing. When I returned to the kitchen, Harsen and Mira were speaking in hushed tones. Family meeting? I asked. Something like that, Harsen replied. Have you given any thought to our conversation? I have, and here's my counteroffer. Full immunity for Tessa, full custody of Jasper for me, and you cooperate completely with the federal investigation. In exchange, I don't release the additional documents. Additional documents? I smiled. Did you really think Tessa only copied the files about bribes and permits? She was very thorough, Harsen. Very thorough indeed. His face went pale. What else does she have? Why don't you ask her yourself? I'm sure the FBI would be happy to arrange a meeting. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear Harsen's voice rising in anger and Mira's attempts to calm him down. But I was already thinking about Tessa's phone call, about the fear in her voice, about what might have happened overnight to change the game again. The elevator ride to the parking garage felt endless. When the doors finally opened, I stepped out and immediately sensed something wrong. The garage was too quiet, too empty for a Tuesday morning. My car sat in its usual spot, but there was a white van parked nearby that hadn't been there the night before. I approached my BMW cautiously, keys in hand. As I reached for the door handle, a voice spoke from behind me. Mr. Kelran? I turned to find a woman in her 30s, athletic build, wearing a dark suit and an expression that said federal agent, as clearly as if she'd worn a badge on her forehead. Agent Sarah Mitchell, FBI, she said, showing her credentials. We need to talk. About what? About your sister-in-law's safety, and about some very interesting documents that arrived at our office yesterday. My heart started pounding. Is Tessa all right? That's what we're trying to determine. Someone broke into her apartment last night. Professional job, nothing stolen, but her computer was destroyed and her files were searched. Where is she now? Safe house. She's asking for you. I looked back toward the elevator, thinking about Harsen upstairs, probably making phone calls to people who specialized in making problems disappear. Let's go, I said. As we walked toward the white van, Agent Mitchell spoke quietly. Mr. Kelran, I should warn you. This situation is more dangerous than you might realize. The corruption we're investigating goes beyond simple bribery. There are safety violations that have put people's lives at risk, buildings that should never have been approved, inspections that were falsified. How bad? Bad enough that people have been hurt, a parking garage collapse last year, an office building fire where the exits were blocked, both connected to Rellan Holdings projects. The weight of what she was saying hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about money or family pride anymore. People had been injured, maybe worse, because of Harsen's greed. What do you need from me? I asked. Everything you know, everything Tessa gave you, and your help in making sure she stays alive long enough to testify. As we climbed into the van, I thought about Jasper getting ready for school upstairs, unaware that his family's world was about to collapse completely. Whatever happened next, I had to make sure he was protected, even if it meant destroying everything else I'd ever cared about. The van pulled out of the garage and into the Chicago morning traffic, carrying me toward a confrontation I wasn't sure I was ready for. But there was no turning back now. The game had changed, and the stakes were higher than I'd ever imagined. The FBI safe house was a nondescript apartment building in Rogers Park, the kind of place where nobody asked questions and everyone minded their own business. Agent Mitchell led me up 3 flights of stairs to a door guarded by a serious-looking man in a cheap suit. Tessa was sitting at a small kitchen table, her laptop open, surrounded by stacks of documents and empty coffee cups. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her clothes wrinkled. "Silas," she said, standing to hug me. "Thank God you're here." "Are you hurt?" "Just scared." They were professionals, whoever they were, in and out of my apartment in under 10 minutes. If I hadn't been staying at my friend's place, Agent Mitchell closed the door behind us. "Ms. Rellan has been very helpful in explaining the scope of your father's operations, but we need corroboration, independent verification of the documents she's provided." I sat across from Tessa, noting the fear in her eyes. "What exactly did you give them?" "Everything I could find. 20 years of falsified inspection reports, bribery payments disguised as consulting fees, safety violations that were covered up." She pulled up a file on her laptop. "Look at this." The screen showed architectural plans for a downtown office building I recognized, one of Harsen's flagship projects from 5 years ago. Red marks highlighted structural deficiencies, substandard materials, and fire safety violations. "The Meridian Tower," I said, "where we had dinner last night." "Exactly. The foundation work was rushed. The steel beams don't meet city specifications. The fire suppression system was installed incorrectly." Tessa's voice was shaking. "There are 3,000 people who work in that building every day." Agent Mitchell leaned over my shoulder. "We've had structural engineers reviewing these plans. Their preliminary assessment is that the building poses a significant safety risk." "How significant?" "Catastrophic failure is possible under certain conditions. High winds, seismic activity, or a major fire could cause a partial collapse." I stared at the screen, thinking about all the times I'd been in that building for family dinners, business meetings, celebrations. "How many other buildings are we talking about?" 17 that we've identified so far, Tessa said, all built in the last decade, all with similar safety violations. My phone buzzed with a text from Mira. "Where are you? Daddy wants to meet this afternoon." I showed the message to Agent Mitchell. "He's probably planning his next move." "We need you to wear a wire," she said. "Get him talking about the safety violations, about the cover-ups. He's not stupid. He'll never admit to anything incriminating. He might if he thinks he can still control the situation, if he believes he can buy you off or threaten you into silence." Tessa reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "Silas, there's something else, something I haven't told anyone yet." "What?" "The parking garage that collapsed last year, the one where 2 people were seriously injured. I found the original inspection reports. The structural engineer flagged major problems, but Daddy had them falsified. He knew it was dangerous, and he let people use it anyway." The room went quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. I thought about Harsen's casual threats that morning, his willingness to destroy his own grandson's life to protect his empire. "He's a monster," I said quietly. "He's my father," Tessa replied, tears starting to flow. "And I'm the one who's bringing him down." Agent Mitchell sat beside her. "You're doing the right thing? People's lives are at stake. What about my life? What about Jasper? What happens to us when this all comes out?" "Witness protection is an option," Mitchell said, "for both of you, if necessary." "I'm not running," I said firmly. "Jasper's my son, and I'm not letting anyone take him away from me. Not Harsen, not Mira, not anyone." "Even if staying means putting him in danger?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I thought about Jasper's trust fund, his private school, his comfortable life in the penthouse, all of it built on corruption and lies. "He deserves better than this," I said finally. "Better than a family fortune built on other people's suffering." My phone rang, Harsen's number. "Answer it," Agent Mitchell said, nodding to a technician who was setting up recording equipment. "But don't agree to meet anywhere private, somewhere public where we can provide backup." I accepted the call. "Harsen." "Where the hell are you? We need to finish our conversation." "I'm thinking over your offer." "Think faster. The FBI is asking questions about building permits. Someone's been feeding them information, and I need to know who." "Maybe you should ask Tessa." "Tessa's disappeared. Her apartment was searched last night, but she wasn't there. You wouldn't happen to know where she is, would you?" The casual tone didn't fool me. He was fishing, trying to determine how much I knew about the break-in. "Why would I know where your daughter is?" "Because you two have been conspiring against me. But that ends now, Silas. Meet me at the Meridian Club in 1 hour. We're going to settle this like civilized men. The club's pretty public. The private dining room, same one where you made such a scene last night. I looked at Agent Mitchell, who was shaking her head vigorously. I'll be there, I said. Come alone. And Silas, bring whatever documents you think you have. All of them. The line went silent. Agent Mitchell was already on her radio, coordinating surveillance teams. That was incredibly stupid, she said. He's planning something. Probably. But it's also our best chance to get him talking. He's desperate now, making mistakes. What if he's planning to eliminate you permanently? Then you'll have him on murder charges too. Tessa grabbed my arm. Don't do this, please. We have enough evidence already. We have evidence of bribery and safety violations, but we need him to admit he knew people would get hurt, that he chose profit over human lives. Agent Mitchell checked her watch. 45 minutes to set up surveillance. The dining room will be monitored, but if he tries to move you somewhere else, I won't go. What if he threatens Jasper? The question hit like a punch to the gut. I thought about my son at school, unaware that his family was falling apart, that the grandfather he adored was a criminal willing to hurt innocent people for money. Then I'll do whatever it takes to protect him, I said. But first, I'm going to make sure Harsen Rellan pays for what he's done. As the FBI team prepared their equipment, I thought about the choice I was making. Walking into that dining room meant crossing a line I couldn't uncross. It meant accepting that the family I'd married into was beyond redemption, that the only way to protect the people I loved was to destroy the people who'd raised them. But some choices make themselves. And sometimes, the only way to save what matters is to burn everything else to the ground. The Meridian Club's private dining room looked different in daylight. Less glamorous, more like what it actually was. An expensive stage where wealthy people performed their carefully rehearsed roles. Harsen sat at the same table where we'd celebrated my birthday the night before, but now he looked older, more fragile, like a man watching his empire crumble in real time. Rafe Deal sat beside him, expensive suit wrinkled, his usual arrogance replaced by nervous energy. At 44, Mira's lover had the soft look of a man who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. That was about to change. Silas, Harsen said as I entered, thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries. You wanted to talk, so talk. I took a seat across from them, acutely aware of the recording device Agent Mitchell had taped to my chest. The FBI surveillance team was positioned throughout the club, but I was still alone in this room with two desperate men who had everything to lose. We seem to have a misunderstanding, Harsen began, about the nature of my business practices. No misunderstanding. I know exactly what kind of business you run. Rafe leaned forward. Careful, Silas. Accusations without proof can be dangerous. Like falsifying inspection reports, like bribing city officials, like building structures that put people's lives at risk. Harsen's expression didn't change. I've built half the skyline in this city, provided jobs for thousands of people, created economic growth that benefits everyone. You've also cut corners that have gotten people hurt. Construction is inherently dangerous. Accidents happen. The parking garage collapse wasn't an accident. You knew the structural supports were inadequate. For the first time, Harsen's composure slipped slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Inspector Williams flagged the problems in his original report, recommended major structural changes, but somehow the final report showed everything was fine. Amazing how reports can change when enough money changes hands. Rafe cleared his throat. Even if that were true, which I'm not admitting, it would be difficult to prove in court. Would it? Tessa's been very thorough in documenting your practices. Bank records, phone logs, original inspection reports. The FBI seems very interested in her evidence. Harsen's face darkened. Tessa is a disturbed young woman, emotional, unreliable. Any lawyer could discredit her testimony. What about the other witnesses? The inspectors who are willing to testify in exchange for immunity? The construction workers who were ordered to use substandard materials? There are no other witnesses. Are you sure about that? The question hung in the air. Through the dining room's windows, I could see Lake Michigan stretching to the horizon, its surface choppy under gray October clouds. Somewhere out there, the FBI was listening to every word, building their case brick by brick. What do you want? Rafe asked finally. I already told you. Full custody of Jasper, the lake house, and complete cooperation with the federal investigation. The lake house belongs to Mira. Mira's about to have bigger problems than real estate, unless she cooperates too. Harsen stood and walked to the window. You're asking me to destroy my own family. Your family was already destroyed. You just didn't realize it yet. And what about Jasper? What happens to him when his grandfather goes to prison, when his mother's family name becomes synonymous with corruption? Jasper will be fine. He's stronger than you think. He's 11 years old. He needs stability, security. He needs honesty, something he's never gotten from your family. Harsen turned back to face me. I could make all of this go away, you know. The investigation, the evidence, the witnesses. Money has a way of solving problems. Are you trying to bribe me? I'm trying to save my family. By destroying anyone who threatens your empire. By protecting what I've built, what I've earned, what you've stolen. The words hit like a slap. Harsen's face flushed red, and for a moment, I thought he might actually attack me. Instead, he sat back down, suddenly looking every one of his 72 years. You have no idea what it takes to build something from nothing, he said quietly. The sacrifices, the compromises, the difficult decisions. Like deciding to let people work in dangerous buildings. Like deciding to provide jobs and economic growth instead of letting bureaucrats strangle progress with red tape. Red tape that exists to keep people safe. Safety is expensive, sometimes prohibitively so. I leaned forward, making sure the recording device caught every word. So you decided other people's safety was less important than your profits? I decided to build this city's future. If that required certain accommodations with regulatory processes, then so be it. Rafe grabbed his arm. Harsen, don't what? Don't tell the truth? We've provided more economic benefit to this city than any safety regulation ever could. Even if it meant people got hurt? Regrettable, but necessary. You can't build an empire without breaking a few eggs. The casual callousness in his voice made my stomach turn. This was the man who'd raised my wife, who'd been a grandfather figure to Jasper, who'd welcomed me into his family with smiles and expensive gifts. Those weren't eggs, I said. They were human beings. They were acceptable losses. The phrase hung in the air like poison gas. Through my earpiece, I could hear Agent Mitchell's voice. We've got enough. Get out of there. But I wasn't finished yet. What about Jasper? I asked. Is he an acceptable loss too? Jasper is family. So was Tessa. But you were willing to cut her out of the inheritance, willing to have her apartment broken into when she threatened you. Harsen's eyes narrowed. I don't know anything about that. Just like you don't know anything about the parking garage, or the office building fire, or the 17 other structures that are accidents waiting to happen. You're fishing. I'm documenting, for the record. Rafe suddenly understood. He's wearing a wire. The realization hit Harsen like a physical blow. He stared at me with something between rage and admiration. You clever little weasel. I learned from the best. The FBI won't be able to use any of this. You entrapped us. Actually, I just let you talk. Amazing what people will admit when they think they're in control. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Mitchell. Move to extraction point now. I stood to leave, but Harsen's voice stopped me. This isn't over, Silas. Yes, it is. You just don't realize it yet. I still have resources, connections, people who owe me favors. And I still have Tessa's evidence, along with everything you just admitted to on tape. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Harsen? You might want to avoid tall buildings for a while, especially ones your company constructed. You never know when structural problems might become apparent. The look of horror on his face was almost worth everything I'd been through. Almost. As I left the dining room, I could hear Rafe's frantic whispers and Harsen's angry responses. But I was already thinking about the next phase of this war, about protecting Jasper from the fallout, about building a new life from the ruins of the old one. The FBI extraction team was waiting in the lobby, their presence subtle but reassuring. As we walked out of the club together, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The game wasn't over yet, but for the first time, I was winning. 3 days later, the news broke like a dam bursting. Federal agents raided Rellan Holdings at dawn, seizing computers, files, and financial records. By noon, the story was on every major news network. Construction empire under federal investigation, safety violations alleged in downtown buildings, corruption probe rocks Chicago development. I watched the coverage from the FBI safe house, Jasper beside me on the couch, his face pale as he processed what was happening to his family. Tessa sat across from us, her laptop open, monitoring social media and news sites for updates. Dad? Jasper said quietly. Are we in trouble? No, buddy, we're not in trouble. but Grandpa Harsen might be. Because of the buildings? He was 11, but he wasn't stupid. He'd heard enough of the news coverage to understand the basics. His grandfather's company had built dangerous structures, people had been hurt, and now the government was investigating. Because he made some bad choices, I said. Choices that put people at risk. Will he go to jail? The question hung in the air. On the television, a reporter was standing in front of the Meridian Tower, explaining how structural engineers were conducting emergency inspections of Rellan Holdings properties throughout the city. I don't know, I said honestly. That's for judges and juries to decide. My phone rang. Mira's number. I should take this, I told Tessa, walking into the kitchen. Silas? Mira's voice was strained, desperate. Where are you? Where's Jasper? We're safe. The FBI came to the penthouse this morning. They had a search warrant. They took my computer, my files, everything. What did you tell them? Nothing. Rafe said not to talk without a lawyer present. Rafe's probably going to need his own lawyer. This is insane, Silas. Daddy's not a monster. He's made mistakes, yes, but he's not the criminal they're making him out to be. Through the kitchen window, I could see Agent Mitchell talking on her phone in the parking lot. The safe house was temporary. We'd need to make permanent decisions about where to live, where Jasper would go to school, how to rebuild our lives. He admitted to knowing about the safety violations, I said. He called injured people acceptable losses. That's not a mistake, Mira. That's a choice. You trapped him. You manipulated him into saying things. I let him tell the truth, finally. What about us? What about our marriage? The question surprised me. After everything that had happened, she was still thinking about salvaging our relationship. There is no us, I said. There hasn't been for a long time. Because of Rafe? Because of the lies? Because of the betrayal? Because you were willing to destroy me to protect your father's empire? I was trying to protect our family. Your family. Your father's family. I was never really part of it, was I? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. What happens now? She asked finally. Now you decide who you want to be. Your father's daughter or someone who does the right thing. What does that mean? It means you cooperate with the investigation. You tell them everything you know about the safety violations, the bribes, the cover-ups. I can't betray my own father. He betrayed you first. He was willing to sacrifice you to protect himself, just like he was willing to sacrifice everyone else. Another silence. On the television in the living room, I could hear a news anchor discussing the potential criminal charges: bribery, conspiracy, reckless endangerment, possibly manslaughter if the parking garage victim's injuries were severe enough. Jasper wants to see you, I said. But only if you're ready to be honest with him, about everything. About Rafe? About all of it. He deserves the truth. He's just a child. He's your son, and he's stronger than you think. I could hear her crying on the other end of the line. I've lost everything, haven't I? You've lost the lies. Whether you've lost everything depends on what you do next. After she hung up, I returned to the living room. Jasper was still watching the news, his young face serious as he tried to process the destruction of the only world he'd ever known. Dad, he said, will Mom be okay? I hope so, but that's up to her. And us? Will we be okay? I sat beside him and put my arm around his shoulders. We'll be better than okay. We'll be free. Free from what? From lies. From secrets. From people who think money is more important than doing what's right. He leaned against me, and I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. Whatever happened next, I had to make sure he grew up with better values than the ones that had destroyed his mother's family. Agent Mitchell knocked on the door, then entered with a serious expression. We've made arrests, she said. Harsen Rellan, Rafe Deal, and 3 city inspectors. The charges include bribery, conspiracy, and reckless endangerment. What about Mira? She's agreed to cooperate. Full immunity in exchange for her testimony. I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that she'd chosen the right path, sadness that it had taken the complete destruction of her family to get there. What happens to us now? I asked. That's up to you. Witness protection is still an option, but with the arrests, the immediate danger has passed. We'll stay in Chicago, I said. This is Jasper's home. Even with all the publicity, the media attention, especially because of it, people need to see that you can stand up to corruption and survive, that you can choose integrity over comfort. Jasper looked up at me. Are you sure, Dad? I'm sure. We're going to build something new, something better, something honest. On the television, the news had moved to footage of the Meridian Tower being evacuated as structural engineers conducted their inspection. The building where we'd celebrated my birthday, where Harsen had tried to threaten me into silence, where his empire had finally begun to crumble. It seemed fitting, somehow, the end of one story and the beginning of another. As the sun set over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, I held my son close and watched the old world burn. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, new opportunities to build something better from the ashes. But tonight, for the first time in years, I felt completely free. Free from lies, free from corruption, free from the golden chains that had bound me to a family that valued money more than human life. The revenge was complete, but more importantly, the truth was finally out. And sometimes that's the only victory that really matters.